Hello, my name is Dr. Pat Bona, and I'm here to demonstrate my Posture Prep cross-fiber grooming system. Optimally, we want to see our horses standing four square, whether they're standing in the stall, they're standing in the cross ties. But they're not always going to be standing that way if there's something going on in their bodies that is going to cause their body to go to the path of least resistance. If they had a big run around the field and they slipped a little bit, they may be a bit tighter on their hamstring muscle. So they're going to stand in a position that's going to relieve some of that stress on their hamstrings. They may just be a bit tired, and then instead of standing nice and squarely, they're resting a leg, hind leg, and that's a normal thing to do. But generally we want to see, optimally, we want to see our horses to be stopped, standing in the cross ties quietly, four square. When we're riding, we ask them to halt. We want them to be able to naturally stop four square. That tells us that our horses are comfortable and they're fairly symmetrical. With the Posture Prep cross-fiber grooming system, we're going to use our grooming time more intently, or with an intent that we're going to evaluate our horses before we ride them. We're going to figure out whether they're in great shape, that they're enjoying their grooming, or maybe they're a little bit sore on their hindquarters because of the jumping that we did the day before. And that can also help to go ahead and redirect how you're going to ride that day. So we can use the grooming system not only as a pre-ride warm-up, but a post-ride cool down for your horse. I like to do my grooming in the stall because I like my horse to have the ability to move around and stretch and participate in his pre-ride warm-up. Of course, you want to work within the horse's tolerance and your safety, so if you're not sure how your horse is going to respond and you do have them in the stall or somewhat ground tied, then you want to have a lead line on them so you can go ahead and control their head. This is Gunnar. He's a 26-year-old thoroughbred. He's been retired for 6 years. He was raced for 8 years, and then he had done hunters, jumpers, and some eventing. Now, it's not unusual for older horses to lose their top line, and it's definitely not unusual for a thoroughbred to lose their top line. He's also being treated for Cushing's, but he is looking quite happy and healthy for his age and all the opportunities he had in his life. So, what I'd like to talk about is the three zones relative to the grooming. We have our top line zone, which goes from the pole across the neck, down the back and the spine, across the hind end to the point of the buttocks. Now, I typically start working from the point of the buttocks up across the hind end, across the back, through the neck, and into the shoulders, and that's the top line zone. I like to start there first because we want to warm them up there. As we go down, when they're warmed up, they can go ahead and stretch up through the muscles that are already nice and relaxed through their back. Typically, I groom my horse one side and then the other side. Today what I'd like to do is groom the top line zone of Gunnar first on the left, and then we'll switch around to the right to see what kind of different reactions we get from the right to the left. Again, we want to observe our horse's posture before, during, and after we're grooming them to see if they look more relaxed, they're standing four square, and tells us a lot because posture is the language of the horse. The second zone is our core zone, C-O-R-E, like our core. We want this to be nice and strong and flexible to be able to lift and stretch through the back and the top line, so we have better suspension, more flexibility through the spine. The third zone are the horse's legs, because their feet help to set the timing of the horse's gait. Well-shod, well-trimmed horses are going to have a better, truer timing and rhythm to their movement. So we call that the timing zone. Within the top line zone, there's two key areas that you want to pay special attention to. That would be the cap of the scapula and the point of the hip. These are very important because we have attachments of muscles. Muscles attach from bone to bone. We have attachments in the scapula that pretty much go out like the spindles of a wheel. And the same is true with the point of the hip. So we need to have and want all these attachments of these muscles, which are tendons, to the bone to be happy and healthy. If they're happy, healthy, meaning they're not painful, they're not tight, these muscles have a greater degree of flexibility. So we really want to make sure that we groom all around these edges and on the bones. It's important to groom gently within the horse's tolerance, but we are grooming across the bones because that's where the muscles attach. If those attachments aren't happy, the muscle can't go through the full range of motion, can't have the full strength. The muscle fibers of the top line run in a lengthwise direction. Thus the cross fiber grooming. Instead of doing a chaotic grooming, we're going to groom across the fibers. That's therapeutic. It helps to break up adhesions, loosens up the skin on the muscles, and that's one of the first things we want to think about doing. We want the skin loose on the muscles, so it's like wearing a sweatsuit instead of wearing a tight fitted suit. So I'm going to start at the point of the buttocks. I like to take a bit of a modified lunging stance so I have a wider base of support, keep my free hand on the horse so I can monitor how he's moving, how he's feeling, and you feel things happening in the body as they relax or get tense. So I'm going to go across the point of the buttocks. Again, I start light, so I'm feeling how his skin is on his body, on his muscles, versus trying to get in deep and quickly loosen up the muscles. Want to groom across the sacrum, across the spine, and I'm laughing because he's making a face that he likes it. And that's what we want to be able to do. When I'm on the left side, I use my right hand on the lower half of the horse, and when I'm on the right side, I use my left hand. So you can even look and watch how the muscles are reacting, not just underneath your groomer, which I take about 4 to 5 inch strokes. I'll go over an area maybe 5 or 6 times. If it's nice and loose, I'll move on. Otherwise, I'll go a little bit longer. So these muscles have the tendency to be a little bit bulgy and tight up there. I'm going across the sacroiliac area, the lumbosacral area. His belly's starting to gurgle, which is a good thing. And he has a bit of a scar here. Scars are very important to understand the fact that that's going to hold tissue tight. Our fascia is like cellophane. If you have a nice flat piece of cellophane, it's easy to stretch and make it nice in one flat piece. If you have cellophane that got twisted to itself, you're not going to be able to loosen it up very easily. With the cross fiber grooming, it's a way to actually loosen that cellophane, which is the fascias between the muscles layer and the skin. So when you have scar tissue, it'll get stuck there, and he really likes this across the point of his hip. So you can see how the skin's actually starting to loosen up across that area, and he's standing pretty still. You can see all the way down towards the stifle. That muscle is nice and loose, and the skin's nice and loose. So I'm going to come up and through. This area is where you have the hip flexors, and that can get pretty tender. When that's tight, this area will be kind of thick and hard. Sometimes horses get roached backed. Sometimes they just stand underneath themselves more because the hip flexors are too tight, and so they're not standing well within gravity, putting more stress and strain on themselves. So his muscles look pretty nice. He doesn't have a lot through the top line, but they're pretty nice and soft. He's been nicely groomed and well taken care of. Actually, I was thinking that he might be a little tender, so we'll see what he's about on the other side. Because I'm using some downward pressure because he says it's good. I'm watching him breathe. His rib cage is relaxed. He's not trying to get away. This is a very important point to note that the lower trapezius muscles come in through here. A lot of horses get very steep into their withers. That's not conformation, that's posture. Those muscles pull tight, they get atrophied through here. So you really want to go ahead and groom right across that area, and you can soften that angle by relaxing the trapezius muscles. And over time, with a horse that's in work, shoeing's good, saddle fit's good, you can actually get that wither to not have as steep of an angle. Now the other trapezius muscles stem up like this, so when I'm going across the withers, I'm going to go this way. And horses quite often really like that. We can get very tight fibers that pull the withers down, decreases the ability of the shoulder to glide nicely on the rib cage and have shock absorption. So lots of times you get really, really thick, heavy fibers. And the more they like it, it's good to put the energy in and groom that out for them. At about this time, I quite often will change my hand and I groom up in through here. There's a little spot through here and you can see where it's kind of sucked in. There's a bony place where part of this muscle inserts, the triceps insert, and if they get tender there, it's going to lock the whole shoulder down and bring their back down. So it's an area that you really want to make sure that you nose nice, it's nice and happy and healthy. Again, this is the cap of the scapula, and the scapula is going to rotate like this. So we're going to make sure all of those edges and the surface of it's nice and loose. We don't have any sore areas. So I'll go every which direction that I can think of to loosen that up nicely. And I'll go across because our shoulder muscles are running down like this. I'm going to go across, and horses have their own rotator cuff muscles, and if the shoulder muscles aren't happy, horses don't want to weight that leg, and lots of times it'll seem like they're stiff through their neck, but they're actually sore and tight through their shoulder muscles. There's another set of important muscles in through this triangle of the neck. If that's tight, that pulls the base of the neck down, and pulling the base of the neck down pulls the whole spine down. So you want to make sure that you're grooming into and even thinking about getting underneath that shoulder blade. The horse's spine is here. So this is all soft tissue. You can see he really likes it. The crest, very, very important to go ahead and make sure it's loose and symmetrical both sides, because if he's tight one side to the other, then the body goes to the path of least resistance, and he's only going to stretch so far down, and when he's bending, he's going to bend more to one direction than the other, and that's going to carry through to the whole body of the horse. So we want to have the crest nice and loose, and that means going all the way up to the pole. It's a nuchal ligament. It's muscular areas. So we want to really make sure that they're nice and comfortable and loose, both right and left. Then it can actually bring us right back down into the underside of the neck, which attaches into the shoulder as well. Whoop, just a little tender there, so I'll lighten up a little bit. Nice, yes. Looking at the contour of the neck can also tell you if there's dips. That's where you want to groom, so that can stretch and loosen and come up. Dip in front of the wither. You want to go ahead and groom in through there, so that can actually have the flexibility to stretch up. So looking at fine little details can make a big difference in getting your horse softer and more symmetrical. Okay, so we flipped Gunnar around to go ahead and start with his top line zone on the right side to see if we see any difference from the left to the right side with him. We'll start at the point of the buttocks, take a nice position, keep my eyes on him, keep my hands on him. I'm actually able to move pretty quickly because my 5 or 6 strokes is telling me he feels pretty good. I don't find any areas that are sore. He's resistant to. This is kind of like a little bit of a basketball in through here, and again, that was similar to the other side. And he does have a scar on the point of this hip as well. Sometimes we know where the scars come from, sometimes we don't. A little bit of a scar there. That's getting stuck up between the skin is sticking on the muscles, and we don't want that. That's that twisted cellophane. That's going to affect the symmetry of the horse and how they can move. Kind of like if you go to the store and you pick up a shirt and it says it's slightly irregular and you think, oh, that won't be too bad, and you put your sleeve into it and it's very uncomfortable. That's what happens when our fascia gets tight, if it gets twisted, and it's especially disruptive if it's asymmetrical.
Okay.
So if we look at the contour of his neck, even with the mane sitting there, he looks like he's actually got a bit more of a dip on this side than he did when the neck was exposed. So if we pull that up, we got to pull it out of the way, we can see that he's actually a little thicker, heavier there. You might not remember saying that, but he is on the right side compared to the left side. So I'm going to make sure I groom up into that crest, into this area, to make sure he can lift his neck nicely, that those serratus muscles aren't too tight, that he can be nice and loose between his neck and his shoulder blade. He doesn't have as nice and clean of an angle through here. It kind of just melds right in. That's because this side is tighter. It's great if you can take pictures of your horse from the right side to the left side if you're going to start with this program and use the system. And the great thing is he's a retired horse, but you can help to keep him healthy and happy and monitor his health by doing this. If you have a horse that's confined to a stall because you're showing or because there's inclement weather, you can go ahead and groom your horse and keep his muscles in better shape, so when you can get out and ride, they're more able to get back into work. Now, I've spent more time here because he likes it and it's tighter. I'm not getting as far as I'd like, so I'm going to come back through here, which I didn't go below the cap of the scapula. Just taking a little bit more energy. He's good about it, but just generally this looks tighter. The skin's moving nicely, but I venture to say he might not have as much muscling on this shoulder as the other one. I like to go ahead and have my forearm on the horse, my hand on the horse's spine, so I can feel what's happening with their body. You can feel them loosen up. Sometimes you even hear the spine releasing. I'll take the little end and kind of cup it around and use it to get into, good boy, some particular areas with shorter strokes. When you feel it tighter, just flexible enough and soft enough that you can mold it around the horse's body parts. Pretty much completed the top line zone on the left side, of course, and the right side, and happy to say that he was pretty non-reactive on both sides. I didn't find anything that really stood out other than him being a bit thicker and less defined in through his shoulder and his neck, that this is tighter in through here. That's probably the biggest thing that I'd seen compared from the right to left. So I'm going to move to the core zone. So we're going to go through the shoulder, across the rib cage, and the abdominal muscles. We have the top line all warmed up, so now we can go and see how his muscles are around his sides and underneath, and hopefully he'll show us that he's happy to stretch up more. Stretch through his back and his top line. Bicep muscles. While you're here, you want to reach around to get the tendon of the pectoralis muscles. You can go and groom on the sternum, because you have to make sure that as the chest muscles insert into the sternum, those attachments are comfortable as well. Now Gunnar is a nice little demonstration of the intercostals. These are the ribs. There's muscles in between the ribs, and if they get tight, the horse can't expand and contract the ribs, so he's not going to be able to breathe as freely. And if the ribs aren't moving properly, the spine can't move properly, because the ribs are attached to the spine. Come back around to the sternum, connect to the sternum, and then connect to themselves in the lower ribs. So you want to go ahead and groom so you can check and groom in between the ribs. So the groomer's made so pretty much any which angle you're going to get some of the teeth that are going to be able to get in between the ribs. And again, you want to go ahead and feel and look and see how the horse is responding. If he's tight, if you can kind of push on his rib cage and get his rib cage to move some. And then we're back up to this area where the end of the rib cages and all these muscles kind of overlap and converge. This lower end of the ribs, it can be kind of sensitive. They can be ticklish. Ticklish is more so that they're uncomfortable. So you want to just be careful when you're back on the lower part of the ribs. The hind quarter, where the stifle is, the femur, and the hamstrings. If they're tight in their hamstrings, it's just like with people. You have tight hamstrings, chances are you're going to have problems with your low back. So pretty much completed the core zone on the right side of Gunnar. Want to groom gently to the inside of the legs as well. And then we want to talk about the timing zone, and especially important is the hocks. So if the skin is tight across the hocks, then the hocks aren't going to be able to go through their full range of motion. If the skin's tight across the gaskins, that's their calves. They're not going to go through their full range of motion. It's like if you were to put on a tight pair of leather gloves and try and open and close your fingers, you wouldn't be very comfortable. The body goes to the path of least resistance, and it's not going to move very freely. So we want to make sure that the skin, which is their clothing, is moving freely across their gaskins and especially their hocks. Where do we have problems with the hocks? On the inside. You can see he's pretty nice. I'm just moving with my hand the skin across the inside of his hock, and the skin across the outside of his hock is moving. That's what we want. If the skin is moving freely, the lymphatics can drain more freely, circulation is better. So you're improving lymphatic drainage, you're improving circulation, you're stimulating acupuncture points. And I'd like, first of all, to make sure that the skin is moving freely in the cross fiber direction. The tendons and muscles are running this way. But it is good to go up and down, because we can still get things that are sticking, adhesion, scar tissue, just not the freest moving fluids and tissue. So you can go up and down through the tendons. That's a good thing to do. But make sure that things are moving across. Then we'll do up and down. Up and down, it's going to be happening. Cross is where we can really get stuck. It's like we want the horses to be in 6-way lycra spandex breeches. It's their clothing is their skin. And groom all the way down into the coronary band, again within his tolerance and your safety. You take 2-3 minutes to groom hind legs and loosen the skin up and loosen the muscles up. You won't believe the difference in how much quickly they'll warm up when you go to ride them. So I've been talking about the 3 zones, but the 3 zones kind of blend one into the other. You want to make sure when you're down into the core zone around the girth area, that's the lower chest muscles, lower pectoralis muscles. That ties into the forearm. Just like in the front, we went from the chest muscles in the front into the forearm, so it kind of blends from the core zone into the timing zone. We want to make sure, this is the bicep muscle, this is the elbow, this is their forearm. So here's the biceps in through here, this is the triceps. Shoulder, elbow. So you want to make sure this is nice and loosened up. You don't find any areas that are tight. The forearm has multiple small muscles. You can see the delineation. You want to groom through there to make sure that there's no sensitive areas and the skin's nice and loose. But basically, the horse's front leg doesn't need as much attention as the hind leg does. And his skin's nice and loose across his forearm, back of his forearm. You can see all that's just quite yummy. So to summarize, posture is the language of the horse. If we could have watched, we can listen. He's licking and chewing, he's yawning. You can hear Gunnar's belly gurgling. They're all signs that he's relaxed, that his parasympathetic nervous system is kicked in, and that's all part about building the immune system and the health of the horse. If you just have a look at him, we can actually see where his angle of his wither is softer. He just wanted to have a nice shake, which tells us he's nice and loosened up. He's been a very patient, very wonderful horse to work on and demonstrate the changes that you can make very quickly and easily when you take the time and attention for your horse to build better partnership and communication with your horse. And again, it's nice to work in their stalls, because when the horses are happy and healthy in their stalls, that's a good, safe place for them to be. And he's about ready to go outside and play with his buddy and have some grass. So I shared a lot of information with you, but if I could have you take home a couple of key, simple concepts. Number 1, that you're going to groom across the muscle fibers. Number 2, that you're going to groom across bony landmarks where the horse's muscles insert, especially at the point of the hip and the cap of the scapula. Number 3, that if you just start gently and evaluate your horse to make sure that his skin, which is his clothing, is moving freely over top of his muscles and over top of his joints, then you will be able to do a fantastic job starting to use the Posture Prep cross fiber system. As you get more comfortable and you learn more about your horse, you'll be able to groom deeper into their muscles, and you'll understand their bodies by understanding their posture.